Hey friends, it's Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and for this week's video we have 3 things that we want to cover, and the bulk of the video is going to be on number 1, which is some do's and don'ts for attending a national reptile show. So this is kind of timely since it's March of 2023 and not this upcoming weekend, but the weekend after that is the spring Tinley show, which we are stoked about. So we're going as attendees. We are super excited to meet up with everybody, and if you're going, definitely stop by, say hi to us. We definitely love talking to people. But the second thing that we kind of want to show off is that we got an upgrade for the snake shop, and that is this ARS 7030 rack. And we only have a couple animals in it right now, but it's just, we're super excited about it. This is our 4th ARS rack. We are expanding, so that's why we wanted to talk about it. Don't tell Courtney though. And then the last one that we wanted to show off, let me grab the camera really quick, is this cool little cart slash standing table that we are getting to replace our trusty old card table over there. So we're going to get everything moved over. Hopefully it'll look a little bit better, and we can roll it out and use it to show off some snakes without it being like really kind of just black, plain, kind of gross from that old card table. Anyways, let's get to it. Now that we're past that little fiasco, let's jump into the meat of this video, and that is the do's and don'ts of attending your first national reptile show. And in my opinion, I think that one of the biggest benefits of going to a national reptile show is networking with other people in the community. So that's our first do, is network. Network with as many people as you possibly can. This can be other small reptile keepers, this can be people that you see on YouTube or Instagram or anything like that, is network. Because by being in person and being able to build up that face-to-face connection, you can forge relationships that are way stronger than if you only ever like their posts on Instagram. So I think networking is a super powerful aspect of going to national shows, because you're able to build up those relationships with other people in the community that you really can't do very well through social media. Number 2, and this is kind of like a subset of networking, but introduce yourself. So it happens quite a bit where people will come up and start talking to us, and I always feel bad because if they don't introduce themselves right away and they're not wearing like a branded shirt, I will not really know who they are, just because a lot of times on social media we are posting pictures of our animals, not necessarily of ourselves. And it just makes it a little bit harder to actually like make that connection. So I would say if you are trying to network with somebody, introduce yourself right away. Go up and say like, hey, I'm Steven with Leviathan Snakes. I love your stuff on YouTube. It is some of the best animals I've ever seen, that kind of thing. And just talk to them and just strike up a conversation and be natural about it. And I know that that is way easier said than done, but if you start with introducing yourself and then talking about how you know them, it is going to give you a common aspect to start your conversation rather than just coming up and talking to them straight away where they're trying to figure out who you are and if they've forgotten you or anything like that. The next one that I have is more of a don't. So while you're networking and while you're talking to people, because there's going to be a lot of people, and especially at national shows, there are tons of people at these shows, and that the aisles are going to be very packed. And while there is a networking aspect that is really cool and really fun and really important of the show, the primary purpose of the show is for vendors to come there and sell their animals to people who want to buy them. So while you are talking to people, be conscious that you're not blocking a vendor's table, because if you're blocking the table, it's very likely that there are potential customers that may want to look at their animals, but they don't want to be rude and interrupt your conversation. So rather than interrupting you and asking you to move, they will just skip that vendor. And there are so many people and there's so many vendors at Tinley or Arlington or Daytona or anything like this that it is a chance that you blocking the vendor's table may have cost them a sale, because either that person who was going to buy from them ends up buying an animal from somebody else, and then they don't have the funds to buy what they would have wanted to buy from that vendor, or they don't ever actually make it around back to that vendor because they forget about it. So I would say be conscious that you're not blocking tables while you are talking to people at a national level show. The next one, which I don't think happens as much at national level shows, but definitely local shows, is if you are looking at a vendor's animals and you are not intending to buy them, don't ask to hold them. And the reason why you shouldn't ask to hold them is that as you're holding animals, if you hold an animal at vendor A, and then you go to vendor B and you hold an animal there, and you go to vendor C and you hold an animal there, you are increasing the risk that you are going to transfer some kind of biosecurity risk between those different animals. And that doesn't mean that they are sick, but by holding all of those different animals, even with like a Germ-X or whatever it is, you're still causing that cross-contamination risk, and it is overall not the best. In addition to that, if you're holding a vendor's animal, oftentimes that's going to require a lot of attention from the vendor, and if they are paying attention to you with the animal that you're holding and you're not intending to buy it, that means that that's time that they're not able to spend trying to work with another customer who may actually want to buy an animal. So our kind of advice is, if you're at a national level show, don't try to hold the animals unless you are seriously considering buying that animal. Tied up with that don't, since the vendors really are there to sell animals to prospective buyers, don't dominate a vendor's attention so much that they are not able to engage with their actual customers. So if you're coming up, I think it's perfectly fine to say hi and talk and have a small conversation with a vendor that you really, really like, even if you're not trying to buy something from them. But if they have other customers there, I would suggest that you take a step back and allow them to work with those other customers and only come up and engage the vendor in like deep conversation that isn't about buying a specific animal right then and there, when it's kind of like a slow time in the show and there's not other people up there actively looking to buy something. So that way you are not distracting the vendor when they could potentially be making a sale. Going back on the positive side, since we talked about a couple don'ts, something that you should do is, even if you're not necessarily going to the show with the intention to buy something, a lot of people travel for the whole weekend for a national level show. So I think it's very smart to bring enclosures with you. So that way, if you do end up buying an animal, you can set them up in your hotel room and you have heat and a water dish and all of those different things. So that way they are not necessarily sitting in a snake bag or a tub the entire time while you're at the show until you get back to your house. And there are vendors that will ship the snakes to you later on, but if you want to bring them with you, I would highly recommend bringing some temporary enclosures that you can keep potential pickups in at your hotel while you are at a national level show. In addition to that, I will go ahead and throw this out there because I feel like it's a good thing, is even at a national level show, don't impulse buy an animal. Like any other time, these animals live for 20, 30, 40 years, and if you're impulse buying an animal because you're kind of caught up in the hype of being at a national level show, there's a chance you might end up buying an animal that doesn't really fit what your goals are, and if this ends up happening, it may result in a year or 2 years down the road you wishing you hadn't bought the animal and then you're trying to rehome it or something like that. So I think that it is really cool and it's really fun to buy animals at the national level shows, especially when you can go around and see what everybody else is picking up, but only do it if it really does fit with your plans and it really does fit with your projects. The last do that I want to talk about is do negotiate, or don't be afraid to negotiate. So at physical in-person shows, it's often way more likely that vendors will be willing to cut you a deal than on Morph Market, and especially if it's Sunday. If it's Sunday and it's like the last hour and the show is wrapping up and there's an animal that you've been eyeing and it's still available, don't be afraid to go up and offer 20-25% less than what the asking price is. And if the vendor says no, it's not that big of a deal, but I would be willing to bet that most vendors probably will accept it because that's another animal that they do not have to feed or care for, and it opens up an enclosure in their own operation. So it's very likely that you will be able to get some extra discounts at the end of the day on Sunday, even at national level shows. The last thing that I would talk about, and this goes for national level shows and it goes for local shows, and you see it often enough that I don't think it's actually a taboo, but from all of the other animal perspective, nobody that I know actually enjoys when this happens, is don't bring outside animals into the show, whether this is just to show off a pet bearded dragon, or if it is to show off the brand new ball python that you got, because as you're bringing that specific animal in contact or in close proximity to all of the other animals at the show, you are increasing the likelihood that there will be some kind of biosecurity risk that contaminates either your animal or your animal contaminates any of the other animals. So my advice is, even though it is a reptile show, and even though all of the people there love reptiles, if you have a pet animal that you already own, it's probably not a good idea to bring them to the show, besides any aspect of it stressing out the animal because there are so many people. But we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next week.